Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Please do take your seats. We're about to begin. Welcome back once again. A big thank you to all of you for cooperating during the security process.
We request all our guests to quickly take their seats. The ones who are standing close to the door, if you could please come in and take your seats as we're about to dive into our next session for the forum today. Ladies and gentlemen, we resume with an industry that has repeatedly changed shape over the last 2 decades. Broadcast now sits alongside streaming and digital platforms, while sport has become central to the same contest for attention, reach, and engagement.
The media business is no longer simply about what gets made or where it gets watched. Increasingly, it's about the ecosystem around the audience and the economics of holding it all together.
Our next guest has not simply watched those shifts unfold, his career has moved through and often helped remake virtually every layer of Indian media, from Aaj Tak and Star India to the launch of Hotstar. While his impact on cricket broadcasting is widely recognized, he has described the revival of Kabaddi through the Pro Kabaddi League as amongst his proudest achievements.
Our next conversation is titled From Broadcast to Broader Ecosystem, the new economics of media and sport, in conversation with the chairman of Times Internet, Satyan Gajwani. Please welcome Vice Chairman of GeoStar, Uday Shankar. Satyan, Uday.
Uday, thank you for joining us here. You and I have known each other for more than 15 years, and for me, it's been amazing. It's amazing to be here with you because I've watched you play such a meaningful role in changing the media and entertainment ecosystem over this time. And you've gone through so many different roles and different responsibilities. But I have a simple question for you. Today, you're sitting on an airplane, and someone comes and sits next to you, and they go, "So what do you do?" What's the answer?
First of all, thanks for having me here. Really delighted. And as you said, we've known each other for a decade and a half, if not longer. And I have seen how, from a rank non-Indian, you have built businesses in India, and you are a deeper insider to India than I would ever be. So that's pretty amazing. I've seen you grow. Congratulations on that. As for what I do, I really struggle to describe that because I say generally, I tell people that I do this and I do a bit of that, a bit of that. But usually I find the easiest answer is, well, I used to work in media, now I'm kind of retired.
I think you're far from retired. But let's just start with this then. I'm sure we'll talk about some of the other things you're doing soon. But everyone in this room still knows you as the man who has changed the media ecosystem for the last 10 years. For the last few years, you've played a role in helping shape GeoStar. So tell us, it's been about 2 years with it now. More fun or less fun than you expected?
Some days great fun, some days not so much. That's how life goes. But overall, I think it's been a spectacular ride. I think we've created something that's pretty amazing, bringing together two companies with very different DNAs, very different operating models, very different ownerships, and bringing them together almost on the fly, seamlessly, without a glitch, is something that gives me a lot of satisfaction.
So what's that been like? You merged Disney with Reliance's business.
Correct.
What's been the hardest part about that merger for you?
I think the hardest part has been to make sure that to ensure that everything that was happening in the back room must never get reflected at all on the screens, because our business is all about what is seen on the screen. So in the marketplace, with advertisers, with other stakeholders, with content, that should not change. And it wasn't easy, just putting together two sets of people with very different operating models, very different approaches. That wasn't easy, but the team did an amazing job. And then to make sure that while we were bringing the two things together, two entities together, get ready for the next next ride, because the business model of media is under pressure.
It feels like you were almost, building the boat while you were at sea, because it's not like the business can take a pause as you're trying to bring together these two massive businesses. So let's talk a little bit about what the growth and what's happened with GeoStar that's made it so successful over the last couple of years. One of the questions I have, and I have to disclose, I have a conflict of interest because we just bought into an IPL team, and one of the questions we're gonna ask today was whether that was a good idea or not. But let's talk about sports for a second. On one hand, I think sports has likely played a major role in as to why GeoStar has grown so much in the last few years. And yet you're also on record saying sports rights are too expensive and they need to regulate, they need to moderate. So which is it? Has sports been a good investment for you? Is it a good investment?
It's been a great investment for us, but that doesn't take away the fact that it's also financially very challenging. But look at where we are. Till a few years ago, we were a very small company with barely any digital presence. Today we have 600 million monthly active users. That kind of vertical takeoff can happen only with sports. But and of course, we built a great technology platform. We have put together a great team, and the satisfying piece is that a large part of this viewership that comes for sport, we've been able to seamlessly divert them towards entertainment consumption. So all of that has been very satisfying. But financially, sports, especially cricket, prices have run out of control, and that's a real challenge because you know this. 10 years ago, there were at least four media companies always vying for sports rights. Today, it feels like we are the only ones standing. There's something broken.
So now it's going to come to my question. We just committed to buy a piece of Royal Challengers Bangalore. Did we make a mistake?
No, you're very rich. You should buy another one. Maybe buy an NBA team.
All right, so let's say what's ahead now for GeoStar? You've gone from 0 to 600 million like a rocket ship. You've established strength through sports, diversified it into entertainment. What's ahead for the next few years of GeoStar?
So we're working on two very clear areas. One is, of course, keep improving the you know content experience for people, both in terms of the quality of stories, etc., and also the visual experience. And the second thing is to fix the business model, because now my firm belief is that there is a real challenge that all media companies, traditional media companies globally are facing. If you're in the business of premium video, where you spend money to acquire content and you monetize through advertising and subscription, no matter how well you're doing that, you have a huge problem, because advertising is a space that's getting attacked by everyone. Today, everyone is taking away a share of the advertising pie, and you are not taking away anybody's pie. So your pie is shrinking every day. How do we fix that? And how do we turn the tables on those who have taken away the advertising share? That is the real problem every media company is facing in the world. The problem is media guys look for all solutions within content. That's not going to give you an answer.
So content isn't enough to solve this problem. What does that mean?
You need content to get people, but once people have come in, you need to figure out a very, very new model to make money out of the people. Because you know it's really odd to me that advertising and subscription, these two streams of monetization that started something like 200 250 years ago with newspapers, remain the only way for media companies to make money. Everything has changed. How content is produced, distributed, consumed, everything has changed except how it's monetized. Now you cannot build a business in 21st century with a business model that got created in the 19th century.
I'm trying to figure out, I've been in this business now for 15, 20 years, and I'm trying to figure out what tricks you have up your sleeve, because you're right. The business is either we make money by charging customers, or we subsidize that by getting advertisers to support it. Who else can help pay for content and pay for consumption if not the reader, the consumer, the watcher, or the advertiser?
I don't know. We are still figuring out, but there has to be a way. Because if not, media companies have a very bleak future.
So I want to talk about how you have the strategy on pricing and non-pricing that you've had on the IPL. For the first few years that GeoStar had the IPL rights, they offered it completely free, massive customer acquisition. Last year, you brought back the paywall. There was a subscription offering on it. Where are we headed? Was free the right strategy? Was it a test? Was it an experiment? Is it just going to be always, are we going to move more and more towards paid models? What do you think?
So, Satyan, you know this better than I do, that every strategy is valid for a limited period of time. When we were building the platform, it was first GeoCinema and then it became GeoHotstar on the digital side and then GeoStar. The first task was to build the platform and populate it with large volumes of traffic. So the free strategy was just exactly the right strategy. The way we were able to aggregate viewers and get their attention, I think it was one of the fastest ramp ups of a media platform anywhere in the world. Once we'd done that, clearly the economics take over. So we have to start figuring out how to make money and charging people, a very modest price so far, but charging people for that is definitely part of it. I can't imagine that when we are paying $6 billion for one cricket tournament so that most of it can go to you, I can't keep giving it to free for everybody unless you make it free for me.
Well, I can say as one of the IPL team owners, I hope you continue to have enthusiasm in business models and excitement on how you're going to do more with it. I hope others challenge you as well so that you really get your pressure on you to do the best you can with it.
Thank you.
Okay, let's take a step away from cricket for a second. You've played many roles. First, I don't know how many people here know this, but part of the reason Uday feels very close to my heart was that Uday started as a journalist. And you've been one of the few journalists who has successfully transitioned from the non-business side of media deeply into the business side. You grew Star, you helped Star join Disney, you worked with Disney for a while, and after that, I think many people may not understand this fully, but my understanding is you're not working for GeoStar. You started something else, Bodhi Tree Ventures. Tell us a little bit more about that, what the intention was. Why didn't you just come back and build the next big media business? What's your ambition?
As you said, I started as a journalist. It was no part of my career ambition to become or to do what I'm doing and what I've been doing for the last 15, 20 years. But it was a great ride. But at some stage, there are other things, given my social sensibilities, there were other things that deeply interested me. Just making sure that the surging aspirations of people whose financial, sort of abilities were limited, can we create solutions and products for them? That was one important part of of my own agenda. So things like education, healthcare, etc. I was very keen to do that, and it was for those reasons that I left Disney. And I have invested since we created a fund called Bodhi Tree Systems with, and James Murdoch and I are partners. We raised some money and we have made investments in an education company. And the idea is, our primary thesis is to use technology, digital technology, to bridge the gap between affordability and aspiration at scale to people who would be left out because they can't afford to pay that much. And I've seen how dramatically using digital technology for distribution can bridge that gap. Hotstar is a great example of that. GeoHotstar is a great example of that. When I first invested in cricket, I used to be told by everyone that cricket has peaked. And it is because year after year, deploying digital technology, we have cracked the distribution problem and made it affordable to people. Every year, a few multiples of 10 millions people come in and join. And there seems to be no end to it because, more and more people can afford it. Earlier, you needed to buy a TV, get a dish antenna, or take a, cable connection. Today, all you need is a mobile phone. So I think the power of digital technology in solving problems for the teeming millions or billions of this country is huge, and that's what drives me. It is with that agenda that we set up Bodhi Tree. Let's see how far we go.
So is it fair to say that with Bodhi Tree Ventures, you've moved beyond media?
For sure.
What's been, say, one of the most exciting or interesting things you're working on outside of the media world?
So we have made investments in education, and that is something I'm really excited about because we are doing some high quality work on not just distributing educational content, because most edtech companies that have come into the space have focused on creating content and distributing it. But that's the smallest problem in education. Distributing content doesn't mean you can't just give physics content to people and expect them to be proficient in physics. Making sure that people have the comprehension, they understand application. So comprehension and application on is the most important part of it. And then making sure that people have outcome, they get good grades, they get good admissions. We are solving some of those problems, and I'm very excited by what's happening in that space.
Having known you for so long, I think the single trait about you that I find so exciting is you really have a deep understanding about the consumer. You're not illusioned by the things that people in your circles tell you. You have a very strong understanding of what India wants in many ways. So what do you think is the biggest gap today? Whether it's maybe it's content, maybe it's something else. What do you think the people of India need that's not yet being provided that this digital accessibility can provide?
I think there is every single area in this country needs digital accessibility, and more and more of it. There are areas where there is more of, a lot of it is available. Media is one such area where people like you and us, we have tried to provide a lot of content, and you've seen how content consumption has grown, but it's not enough. So accessibility in education, in healthcare delivery, in career development, in safety, security, all of those things. And everyone, there are many solutions available for people like you and I, but because there's huge amounts of focus on that. But people who are marginal income groups and who still have the same aspirations of a good life for themselves or their next generation, can you solve those problems? And I think drinking water to sanitation to everything. And I am a big believer that it's only technology that can allow you or enable you to make that quantum leap in delivering those services with satisfaction.
Amazing. Okay, I'm going to come back to cricket for a second.
Of course.
Today,
it's the $1.8 billion question.
That's my $1.8 billion question. Your question's a larger number, as I understand. Today, JioStar is the single largest buyer of cricket rights in the world. Am I right in saying that?
Yes.
Now, as you know, and as many people know, cricket's going through this change. Traditionally, we relied on country versus country, World Cups. The IPL has upended that over the last 10, 20 years. There are now IPL-like leagues in other countries, the 100 in the UK, Major League Cricket, Big Bash, South Africa T20. What's going to happen? What do you see growing? What do you think is under pressure? What is the cricket landscape going to look like for the Indian consumer and the global consumer in the next 5, 10 years?
So that's an easy answer. The consumers have already spoken, Satyan. They like crisp, short format. They like, IPL. The success of the IPL is not an accident. It just, it's so relevant. It talks to the people of the country in a language that they understand. You don't need, it simplified the game. It's made it pacier. It's exciting, and it's relevant because everybody has a team that they can connect with. Cricket, until IPL happened, cricket was only a clash between two nations. Now there are national clashes that I care about, but how many of those exist? So people have already decided where they want to go and what they want to consume. It's just that the people who are the custodians of cricket are still a step behind. I think that's changing. I think the ICC is very seized of that, and broadly that awareness is there, but people are still lost in the romance of the past.
But I want to challenge you on this, okay? I was in England a month or two ago. The India-England Test Series sold out.
Yes.
The Ashes for 2027 being hosted in London sold out already. Now, it's very easy to say long-form cricket, Test cricket's dead, but there seems to be, we can call it romantic to like it, but there seems to be some appeal to it.
Oh, absolutely. So I said some national clashes still matter. India, England, India, Australia, those clashes still are very relevant. Number one. Number two, I think while filling the stadiums is very important, it's not a great proxy for the wider health of the sport, because how many people you need to fill a stadium? 20, 30, 40,000. The biggest stadiums in the world are 100,000. That's you know that's the number of people, more than that, 10 times the number of people who log in on Hotstar in an instant. So when you're talking about the viability of a sport, so that the boards can make money, so that they can pay talented players well, and they can spend on infrastructure, you need the broader media economics to be to work, and that's where it's under pressure. a, a match between bilateral, some bilaterals are very important, but they you know people come together, they play for 5 days or 10 days or sometimes 25 days, and then they go back and nothing happens.
Hmm.
That is that is tough to sustain.
One of the most exciting stories in cricket in the last 5-10 years especially has been the growth of the women's game, right? The BCCI has made a big push with WPL. The 100 has now launched women's and men's adjacent to each other. Now, I have a politically incorrect question to ask you. Is there real interest and demand in watching women's cricket, or is it a feel-good PR story?
You forgot to mention us, who put in
And
a
of course,
1,000 crores.
the World Cup. The
Correct.
World Cup.
No, and also for Women's Premier League that we paid for large sum of money. I think women's cricket is real. The quality of women's cricket is very high. On a good day, the Indian women's team can beat some of the men's team, some of the national men's team. That's as good as that. And the problem is that BCCI took the right step with WPL. The ICC has taken the right step by, sort of spotlighting women's cricket. But the entire ecosystem still hasn't been galvanized. Look, people don't realize that IPL is throwing up so much talent and Indian cricket is throwing up so much talent because there is so much men's cricket happening at all levels everywhere, that now from the remotest part of Bihar, the most exciting talent can come up. That's yet not happening in women's cricket. Once you do that, I can assure you that there'll be a day when women's cricket will be as exciting as any brand of men's cricket. I'm a big believer, not, it's not politically correct statement, but I actually believe in the power of women's cricket. Look at what Indian women are doing in other sports.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
we just need to enable them.
And I think even on the business perspective, worldwide, women's sports has been one of the fastest growing categories. The WNBA,
Correct.
women's basketball in other
Correct.
countries. It's in the last 5 years, it's really had a breakout.
Absolutely.
Okay.
As it is in my experience, if women are in competition, you better make a gracious exit.
Okay, now I'm gonna ask you for advice. Okay.
This is where I get trapped.
Yes, the goal was to trap you. You knew that. When you signed up for this, you knew that. You are sitting in the chair of the ICC. You're watching the global
Never.
cricket world. You can only do one thing and you have nothing blocking you, but you can make one change to the way the world of cricket operates. What would you do?
I think the ICC agenda of growing cricket in newer markets and countries is a very good one. I would give it a more efficient structure so that there is clear line of progression for every country. Right now, it just any country plays any country. It doesn't matter, because no offense, but India playing most countries does not get anyone excited, and the players of those countries lose. They get demotivated. It's not a great business arrangement. It's not a great morale booster. It's not a great talent discovery. I think soccer has a good model for that. They have organized, you need to promote club cricket in a very big way and take it as deep as possible. IPL success is a great example of that. And then you need to make sure that at national level, there are clusters of teams competing and only some qualified and bubble up to the next level and then to the next level. That's how you will give it a sane structure that's sustainable and it'll throw up talent.
That's great. So Uday, you were a journalist, you ran Star, you ran Disney, you're now one of the people helping drive GeoStar. You have to invest in only one of these three: news, entertainment, or sports. Which do you believe has the best business prognosis for the next 5, 10 years ahead?
I think I'll invest in your news business.
No. That wasn't an option. You get to one of these three. Purely from you're putting on your investor hat now. Now you're Bodhi Tree Ventures. You're not operating. Which of these three media segments?
News, sports, and
News, entertainment, and sports. And you can't blend them because I know you're going to say entertainment and sports.
No. So look, I'm a big believer in the power of entertainment. It is not spectacular like sports, but it's a very rock solid business. Sports, of course, depending on the prices that you pay, sports is a great aggregator and you can make a lot of money. If you get one tournament right, you're home. News has a real business model challenge, because news was essentially the power of intermediation.
I think we should end this segment right here. I think I'm just kidding. Please continue.
So I think news needs to, the social media platforms have done a huge amount of damage to the business of news, and news needs to turn the tables on that. There is some amount of strategic disruption that's due there.
So you told us when we started that 15 years ago, everyone told you sports had peaked. You clearly were the contrarian then, because you took, at that time, Star deep into sports to become a dominant player. What is one opinion today that most people think something and you think something else about that's going to change in the next 5 years?
I think most people think that there's too much content, and I think they haven't seen all of it yet. I think there's going to be way more content, and the level of innovation that will come in content with AI is pretty phenomenal, and people should get ready for that. And I think the other thing, you said one, but I'll take the liberty. The second thing, everybody thinks that distribution alone is important now. I think the power of brand is going to be reinvented because there is so much content coming that brand is going to play an increasingly more important role. And somehow in this whole, tech world, the power of brand is getting undermined. That's a mistake.
Uday, you have been a pioneer in so many ways over the last 10, 15 years. I can't wait to see what you do in the next 5 years. Thank you so much for joining us, for entertaining my questions, tolerating me, and we look forward to seeing what comes ahead with you.
As I said, I admire you, Satyan, coming from being a complete rank outsider, the way you have, become a deep insider. It's a role model for a lot of people who want to do something in India. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please thank Mr. Uday Shankar for joining us.
Thank you, Satyam. Thank you, Uday. The media business once competed for a slot in your schedule. Now it competes for a place in the audience's day. Thank you once again, Satyan and Uday, for leading that conversation.
Moving on, ladies and gentlemen, we are about to now widen the lens to some of the forces reshaping business well beyond any one industry. Technology is changing how and where work gets done. Geopolitics is redrawing markets and supply chains, and demographic shifts are altering where talent demand and growth are found.
But here's the thing, any one of those forces could rewrite a strategy overnight. Today's leaders are having to respond to all three at the same time.
And that is the territory for our next panel titled The Great Rewiring: How AI, Geopolitics, and Demographic Shifts Are Redrawing the Map of Global Businesses. Joining us to take this panel forward, ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together as we welcome onto the stage President and Chief Executive Officer of Marriott International, Anthony Capuano, Chair of Bain Company, Manny Maceda, President of IMD, David Back, and Chief Executive Officer of General Atomics Global Corporation, Dr. Vivek Lal.
And moderating this discussion is author and columnist Pranjal Sharma. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the panelists and the moderator onto stage. Over to you, Dan.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is quite a diverse panel here. We have a advisor in Manny. We have a travel hospitality host in Tony. We have David, who's an educator, and Vivek, who keeps us secure. Right. So we're going to be discussing three big shifts which are occurring across the world, which are defining our daily lives, our businesses, geopolitics, which used to be what one country did to another in some remote part of the world, but now it's happening in the boardrooms. It's a main point of discussion. Technology used to be something, with the grease paints and the gear wheels, but it's again something that we use in our daily lives every second. And that again has an impact on business models and our revenue shifts. And of course, the changing demographics. The aging societies are wondering what to do with their people, and the young societies are wondering how to give them employment. So everywhere you look, there are big shifts happening, and that sets the stage for our conversation to understand how do business leaders plan their next strategy? How do they grow? Can you plan for 6 months or only for 6 weeks? I think we'll have some answers from the global CEOs here, but I'm going to begin by requesting David to give us a quick a brief on how he sees from your perch, David, especially because you're not just looking at young talent but also leadership talent. Quick thought from you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for the opportunity. Look, at IMD, we get to work with leaders, with executives from all over the world. We help organizations develop their next talent, and we do that worldwide. And so we have a front row seat to some of the developments that you just described. And I think our assessment is that globalization is not over. But the logic of globalization has changed. Globalization, for much of the post-Cold War era, was very much about efficiency and scale. You looked at opportunities with the idea that you could source more cheaply, that you could add scale to your distribution. And the logic of globalization has changed. It's much more about security and reliability in this current context. And that is happening, as you described, in the midst of an enormous technological revolution. And I think we're only at the very beginning of that. And it's in the midst of a once in a century energy transition that is happening. And of course, is impacting India, China, and the whole world that is leading on the electrification revolution. And we have the demographic changes, the climate challenges, and so on that you mentioned. So enormous structural uncertainty because of this change. But at the same time, leaders are operating in a world where there's a premium on security and reliability. And that creates a real tension for a lot of leaders and a lot of organizations. What we have landed is that you have to be comfortable with some of that uncertainty. You have to be comfortable with making some probabilistic decisions as opposed to waiting for certainty. You have to spread your bets because there is going to be volatility. And you absolutely have to make sure that the uncertainty and the volatility does not prevent you from making decisions. This sort of calibrated decisiveness we think is important. And one of the things that we're...
But do you see decisiveness, or do you see people worrying about being decisive? Because the moment you take a decision, something changes, and then you worry that, did I take the right decision?
But that's why I think it's so important to spread your bets, right? It's important for everybody to understand, for your board to understand that your CEOs and executives are operating in an environment where they wait for 95% certainty it's going to be delayed, right? So you're going to have to figure out what are your no regrets moves, what are the different scenarios that you have against which you can design strategy, and then you move in an agile and flexible way.
Manny, I'm going to come to you. We were speaking earlier, and there's a very interesting phrase that Manny used, that geography is economy today. Today, if we look at the spread of shifts which are happening, and they're all deep shifts. And you, not just as an advisor, but you're also supporting funds and investors, which actually decides where the capital flows. What is defining businesses, decision making? Um, how are they deciding to do what they want to do? And global businesses, what's your advice to them usually?
Sure. Thanks for having me. I guess the perspective I'll bring both as a global chairman myself of a services company, but as an advisor to both multinationals and investors, is that the nature of the bets is the interplay of all these things at the same time. And you're right, globalization is not over, but the sharpness now of which countries you invest in, for what, for supply, for talent, for customers, directly overlaps with the bets you're making on technology, which is really generational, which overlaps with the energy supply, which is the first layer of the technology stack, which has just gotten interrupted multiple times if you're in Europe because of Russia invading Ukraine, or if you're everywhere else in the world because a big chunk of our supply comes from the left of this nation. So the choices people are making now have to be so intentional. You know, it's almost a return of, there is no such thing as a global corporation anymore. We are deciding where to be and in what supply chain, and we're deciding company by company. And it requires intentionality of bets, whether you're international, multinational, choosing to invest in India, whether other countries, whether you're an Indian multinational and you're building them, whether you're choosing to invest domestically or go overseas, or whether you're a financial investor that's looking at, wow, should I deploy my capital to Japan, or if we have restructuring opportunities, or India, where there's still a great domestic growth economy, or just go after the magic great American, AI companies. Everyone is making those choices with real intentionality.
But do you see in the boardrooms that geography, geopolitics is now top of the line discussion? Is that the biggest anxiety today?
It's a big part of the equation, both for offense and defense. And I'll defer to my friends Vivek and Tony. You know, in the boardrooms I'm on, you are deciding offense, do I deploy in this country or not? And the CEOs of today had to make a lot of tough decisions, both offense and defense. Many American companies, we chose to exit Russia because of situations. You know, I'm on the board of a company called Stryker. I did not expect that as a board, we would be a company taken down by Iran in a cyber attack as a counterattack because of the invasion. That is all part of board discussions now. So geography, and so this gets to the nature of the jobs we have as CEOs, as board directors. We have to be a lot sharper about geography, politics, technology, regulation, energy, culture, talent. Not to whine about it. It's a harder job than it used to be.
Right. Terry, I'm going to come to you. You seem to be unstoppable. Marriott is growing leaps and bounds within India, Asia, despite all the challenges that one would assume would be affecting travel and hospitality. So what's your secret sauce? How are you doing it?
Yeah, I'd love to claim credit for it, but I think there's been a foundational shift. If you laid out a thesis to somebody and you said there'd be pockets of real economic weakness, you'd be in an environment with elevated fuel prices, you'd have active conflicts in Europe and in the Middle East. You laid all of this out and asked how the travel and tourism vertical would be performing, likely you would get opinions that look very different than the reality. And I think that reality is driven in large part by this shift we've seen. Pre-pandemic, you saw the youngest consumers already prioritizing travel and experiences over consumption of hard goods. Post-pandemic, when you look at the credit card data, that the pandemic acted as an accelerant to that trend, and it spread across every demographic. And it's that prioritization of investment in travel and experiences that's really driving the sort of performance that you described, even in the face of very obvious headwinds.
So do you see a shift in consumer behavior? Do you have you seen shifts in the patterns of what kind of markets are which you assumed would grow are not growing, and there are markets which you thought are going to be fairly dormant, are they suddenly spiking up? Do you see any new interesting patterns?
Yeah, I mean, the good news is these sort of sociological trends I describe are largely universal. Now, we operate in an industry that by its nature is cyclical. And so, depending on the day you ask me, there are markets that are booming and markets that are more challenged, and that ebbs and flows. But these fundamental shifts are pretty consistent around the world.
But does it make it easier for you to decide when and where and how to grow?
Yeah, I mean, we have a fairly lofty aspiration, and that aspiration is I want to capture as close to 100% of your travel wallet as possible. And in pursuit of that lofty aspiration, we think the formula is relatively straightforward. We want to make sure we have the right product everywhere you want to travel for every trip purpose. And so, as we think about growing our footprint, we're not trying to time for a quarter or two. We're trying to anticipate the needs of 300 million plus loyalty members for their travel irrespective of trip purpose.
Thanks, Tony. I'll come back to you some more thoughts, but Vivek, I want to bring you in. A lot of geopolitics is now about aggression, and many companies are in the defense industry, especially, for example, in India, it's opened up a lot of private sector investment is coming into that. But globally, countries are now investing deeper and deeper into defense, especially Europe, because of the conflict over NATO. How is this impacting a company like yours?
Yeah, so as you rightly said, I think if you combine the geopolitical environment, disruptions, as well as the AI component of new technologies coming in, quantum science, so forth, it's a very dynamic environment. And so when we talk about supply chains, for example, it's got to be looked through the prism of trust, and trust then becomes very important. As everyone's mentioned, globalization is not going to go away, but ensuring trusted networks across regions and geographies becomes even more important. So evaluation of um, that dynamic map and the ability to transform, given the pace of technology, is going to be critical. And you know, technology cycles are diminishing. New products coming online, especially in the defense and aerospace arena, it makes it even more challenging to be able to adjust. I think there are certain takeaways, for example, persistent surveillance, robust data sharing among trusted partners and allies, um, logistical dominance, electromagnetic spectrum dominance. These are all areas which are going to be even more important in the future as we look at the global map.
You're known for your drones a lot, Vivek. Do you see more of the drone business growing across all the markets? And do you see any specific projection?
Yeah, I think autonomy and unmanned, uncrewed systems are going to be even more prevalent going forward. I think there's a technology triad, if you will. I think nuclear energy is going to be even more important going forward, given the energy security dynamics in the world. Nuclear energy will then be necessary component to drive AI. And despite a lot of the progress in AI, I think we're still in the infancy of what's possible. AI by itself will not do much unless human judgment is in the loop. Human judgment is often not talked about too much in conjunction with AI, but I think that's going to be important. And that combination will drive, of course, autonomy and so forth. So yes, I do see greater emphasis on uncrewed systems.
I want to talk about the multi-generational teams that we have in all the companies today. It used to be that anybody who's young in the first 5 years were effectively, I think, corporate slaves, if I can use that phrase. You just and when we started a career, it was like just follow the leader, right? Now today, everybody is a leader. and everybody feels that we have a right to know what is going on in the company. So a question I'd like to put to all of you is that as CEOs of global diversified companies working across multiple markets, what do you see as the big changes that leaders should be ready for when they meet and work with young consumers and young team members? Tony, maybe you could share some thoughts.
I'd say a few factors. I think number one, many of the folks in this room grew up with a perspective that probably guided by your parents and your educators that don't job hop, right? Otherwise, your resume is going to look terrible and it's going to make it very difficult to grow your career. This generation is void of that point of view.
So if you don't job hop today, then you're staying.
Yeah, they wear it as a badge of honor.
Okay.
I think number two, probably more than previous generations, because they have so much flexibility, they are keenly focused on finding companies whose values match their own. And that's not values that are particularly well written in a corporate brochure. They have a real expectation that these companies are living those values and they will interrogate progress against those values. And then I would say number three, there is an expectation of communication transparency that is dramatically different than the expectations of prior generations.
So how are you changing? How are you responding to that?
Well, thankfully, we're getting ready to celebrate our 100th anniversary, and our core values were etched in granite 100 years ago, and thankfully, I think we do a good job living those core values. But on the transparency piece, I'm at the end right now of a 2.5-week trip where I've visited every one of our continent teams and had very open, very candid, very transparent town halls with every level of the organization. And there's an expectation that that will come from our most senior leadership very consistently.
Manny, do you see the same? The leadership is being challenged not just by investors, but by the younger team members.
Yeah, Tony's comments resonate. And so, as leaders, where talent continues to be a big part of our job as leaders, attracting, developing, retaining talent, I have an industry where there is a force that's even stronger than scale and technology advantage. It's talent loyalty. And Tony knows there's a high correlation between talent loyalty and customer loyalty. So if you can crack it, and all the forces we've talked about, I can joke how, gee, this is so hard for us CEOs. Well, it's hard for our young talent, right? And so we built companies, all of us, that were able to attract talent based on some clarity of strategy and some value proposition for them that they could make a good living, develop, and all of the things we talked about are also on their minds, right? We said it's part of the value proposition that technology will enhance how you do your job. Well, some of them worry technology will replace my job. It's part of the value proposition. You will join a global company, and you can move around the world and work in India and China. And now the first thing when you apply to our company, like many, is what's your citizenship? You have a visa. And so, you take all of the into that account, and you have empathy as leaders that part of our roles is, and you can connect the dots to serving the needs of our shareholders, serving the needs of our customers requires creating value propositions to develop and really retain our talent. And it's some of the things Tony said: awareness, communication, training, development, and a value proposition that might be a little bit different from the ones that our parents taught us.
Right. So, David, you work with young and not so young leaders, but sometimes when the aspirations go ahead of the ability of the organization to deliver, what happens? It creates a conflict, and sometimes the aspirations and expectations can be unreasonable. How do you then manage that conflict and friction?
Well, I think aspirations remain incredibly important for some of the reasons that we talked about. I think one of the most important things that leaders do is articulate a vision for the future that people can get excited about, one that responds to and expresses the values of the organization. Vivek, you spoke about trust. Trust matters a lot within the organization as well. I speak to CEOs who say, exactly as you said, Tony, that a lot of employees expect that they can email the CEO and they're going to hear back from that CEO. And remember, as you said, Manny, this is the generation that grew up with social media and disinformation. This is the generation that was shaped by the pandemic when they often felt that perhaps they didn't have access to the information. So I think that's where that need for transparency and access comes from. But you're absolutely correct. There are, of course, situations where organizations get ahead of themselves. And that is how that trust then potentially gets destroyed, where suddenly you realize that what you were being told was perhaps a bit of hot air. And so it's a very careful balance between exciting with a compelling vision for the future, but not being too far ahead of the organization that you then might run into the kind of credibility challenges that this generation in particular is going to be very sensitive to.
Vivek, how's your experience in the defense industry? I
Yeah.
mean, a lot of people will say, I don't want to join the defense industry. I mean, this is, you have a Department of War now. So why should I why should I join an industry which is basically about war and not about peace?
I think there is a tremendous interest, of course, in critical and emerging technologies. And I think the future is certainly in the technological revolutions that are happening in almost every sector. However, I do think what is most important is talent, which everyone has spoken about, and the ability to attract and retain talent. And it's multi-generational talent, of course, that forms most of the teams. And as we were talking earlier, it's an inverted pyramid now, more so than ever, where, one is working for the younger generation, making sure that their aspirations, their needs are taken care of. Uh, Maybe several in the audience have experienced this, but when you interview very young and bright talent, they will say things like, we're going to give you 2 years of our lives. What are you going to do for us? And so you have to create the opportunities and rethink the roles and responsibilities, that you don't necessarily have to be at the company 20 years before you get significant responsibility and be able to perform at higher levels.
I do think
Sorry, go ahead.
cracking this for everybody is probably one of the, if you look at the talent pool applying to, all the great Indian companies represented here and says, what does that young talent, how do you get their loyalty? What are they loyal to? Are they loyal to the country? Are they loyal to their cricket team, like we talked about earlier? And how can you actually construct a value proposition that a big chunk of the loyalty, is to Marriott or Bain or General Atomics, and they still want to go to IMD and will always give back. Yeah, that would be a gift if you can do that.
And the other layer of complexity, you touched on it when you referenced this as being the generation of the pandemic. They're accustomed to remote work, but they don't know the difference. They don't know the appeal of in-person, of informal mentorship, of all these things. And I think for many of us, we scratch our head and say, why aren't we developing that same level of passion and loyalty around the employer brand? And part of that is because of the natural detachment that occurs with remote work.
That's true. I think there's a generation of professionals who've grown up without actually going to office, and therefore they've also lost out on lateral learning. But last part of our conversation, I want to talk about India. We've had political stability and economic continuity in the country after a long time, and that's made a visible difference to our growth path. And this is at a time when you see some of the European countries changing their prime ministers and presidents faster than you can name them. So, from your perch, I'd like your thoughts on where you think India is for your business and what can India do to reinforce its position and accelerate its growth. So I'm going to begin with you, Vivek, because you also have investments in India and you're doing manufacturing, and then come to the other panelists. But from your perspective, how important is India for your company, and what can India do to make more company like yours come into India?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I think India is a tremendous opportunity. We talked about all those building blocks, and they're all present in India. Talent, of course, first and foremost. The ability to go from science to engineering to the economics and the whole wrapper. It's all the ecosystems are present here. And you see how many global delivery centers there are here, how many R&D, global R&D centers there are here. So that whole ecosystem is actually present in India. And beyond manufacturing, I think the next steps, at least in the aerospace and defense, is going to be co-development and R&D in innovation. And I think if you roll out the global map, we don't see any other country that has all the ingredients compared to India that can really not only elevate the technologies and the ambitions of Indians, but also globally that will feed into a lot of other ecosystems as well.
Thank you. Dave.
Look, India's big, and it's not the US and it's not China. And so that alone positions it to benefit from this current moment in geopolitics. It's not without challenges, but India actually has an opportunity, and it aligns at a moment of domestic political stability and sense of purpose with an extraordinarily exciting and favorable demographic picture as well. And we talked about the talent. So that's one of the reasons why we're excited to contribute more to the development of leadership talent. I think that is an incredibly important part as Indian enterprises seize those opportunities. There's so many other things that have been mentioned in previous discussions around education and infrastructure and so on. But I think keeping your eye on that ball of executive talent development to seize the opportunities that the macro context offers, particularly Indian enterprises, is really important, and we're hoping to contribute.
And for IMG, do you see a plan for India? Can you share some of your thoughts and plan for India?
Sure. I mean, the Indian participants in our MBA program are, of course, extraordinary. We're very fortunate to have links here with many family businesses. We're supporting conglomerates. We have a long history here, including by supporting years ago the founding of IMI. We have partnerships here, and we look forward to contributing more.
Thank you. Manny.
I think all the three forces we discussed today, I could say we can go long India, in this post-global era where it's really defined by corridors, regions, bilateral connections. India has the flexibility to be with everybody. I was in India last month, and while I was in Mumbai, everyone talked about Japan. And then I went to Tokyo, and everyone in Japan was talking about India. And there's something like 200 Indian CEOs are actually going to Tokyo on Monday on the trip as an example of the kind of corridors and have some of these post-globalization forces work to your benefit. AI is complicated. Where India can play in this emerging AI stack that is simply put energy to semiconductors to infrastructure to foundation models to applications. Choosing where to play has to be very intentional. That's a long-term bet. But having AI benefit you is something that India should take advantage of, probably more than it has.
But
And
there
then the
is the
last topic
question,
is demographics.
But Manny, the question of sovereignty also comes in, right? Because India is trying to build sovereignty in many of these sectors.
Well, I think sovereignty is an entire longer conversation. I know we're talking about an India strategy, but sovereignty at the company level is also important because just like many, we are multi-sovereign companies. We happen to be U.S. headquartered. Indian multinationals. Our next speaker, Mr. Birla, operates in many different countries. So you have to think about company sovereignty too. But the last thing about demographics, would you say, this is a place where the population is expanding and growing, and anyone who wants to participate looking for growth, this is the place to be. So I'm still very long India on multiple fronts.
Great, thank you, Tony.
Yeah, I mean, you've heard the most important trends, and I think for our business, the demographic advantages that India offers are compelling. India will quickly be our third largest market in the world, and we've got a pipeline behind our existing footprint that'll double our size in no time. By the end of next year, we should be in 100 cities across India. So it'll be a big, big part of our future. And to me, one of the most compelling opportunities, as strong as the industry is today, something on the order of 70% of our demand today is domestic demand, which is fantastic. But what that illustrates is the long-term opportunity for accelerated growth in inbound international.
But tell me, from using a phrase from your sector, what can India do to move from customer satisfaction to customer delight?
Yeah, I think it's all about public-private partnership. Those of us that live in the States, some of the prior campaigns that were done to really raise awareness about the richness of the destinations that India offers, you'd be hard pressed to find another country in the world that has the richness of destinations, the richness of history, the richness of culture, the richness of cuisine. And in some ways, some of it is a well-kept secret. And the way to educate the traveling public is through public-private partnership.
Which means that India has to tell its story better.
That's right. I
Is there-
often get questions about this concept of over tourism, and that's certainly a real issue in some areas of the world. But more often than not, it's more an issue of under promotion and under education. And as a result, international travelers will go to the 2 or 3 cities that are most well known, and it's to their detriment. They're missing the extraordinary richness of the destinations here.
You know, the reason I'm pressing and staying with you is because it's also about brand India, it's about destination India. But is there something that you are doing in India which you are not doing in any other part of the world, which is very unique in terms of maybe innovation or a service offering?
Yeah, I mean, we've made a significant investment in Hyderabad of a technology accelerator, which is really going to be our incubator for technology innovation. It's not an accident that we chose India for that investment, given the depth of talent that was described by some of the other speakers. So we're doing that. I think the other thing we're doing is we're making significant investments in the identification and development of young talent across demographics.
Thank you so much, Tony, Manny, David, and Vivek for joining us. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in thanking them for sharing their perspective. Fairly positive about India. There's a lot more India can do. There's a lot that India has achieved. But at a global level, if we see the 3 big shifts that they were talking about, I think it's also a great moment for all leadership to realize that whatever they've done in the past may not be applicable in the future. So leadership itself needs to change. Thank you once again for joining us.
What a fascinating conversation that was. And clearly, no leader gets to choose just one of these forces at a time. The challenge is responding while all of them are moving. Mr. Kapuadu, Mr. Maceda, Mr. Back, Dr. Lal, a big thank you to all of you for joining us. And thank you, Mr. Sharma, for leading this discussion.
Now, the great rewiring becomes real one business decision at a time. Our next guest has spent more than 3 decades making those decisions across industries, across continents.
Ladies and gentlemen, our next conversation turns to what it means for an Indian business to be truly, truly global. For a long time, going global could simply mean exporting more or entering a handful of overseas markets. Today, the ambition is much larger: to build, to acquire, to operate, and to compete around the world as a multinational in its own right.
And if very few Indian business leaders have lived that journey at a greater scale than our next guest. Since taking charge of the Aditya Birla Group in 1995, he has led its transformation into an approximately $72 billion global conglomerate. Today, it employs 2.27 lakh people across 41 countries, with businesses spanning metals, cement, financial services, fashion, telecom, real estate, renewables, and more.
And that makes him especially well placed for our next conversation: India Unbound, Building Businesses for the World. In conversation with the executive editor of the Economic Times, Sruthijit KK, ladies and gentlemen, with a generous round of applause, let's welcome the chairman of the Aditya Birla Group, Kumar Mangalam Birla.
Over to you, Skip.
Thank you, Suresh. Good evening, everyone. What a formidable montage of speakers we've had here today at the Economic Times World Leaders Forum. Strategy czars, global industrialists, advertising and media royalty, financial honchos, three chief ministers. And as we wait for the Prime Minister's arrival, I couldn't be more pleased than to have with us one of India's foremost industrialists who leads a $120 billion market cap, diversified global conglomerate. Mr. Birla, thank you so much for being here with us
Good to be
today.
here. Thank you for having me.
Wonderful. You've helmed the group now for more than 3 decades, and you've seen your business grow manyfold. You have operations all over the world. When you look at the external environment today with multiple wars and the AI disruption, shipping route blockages, and so on, do you find this moment uniquely challenging, or when you run a large diversified group, is this kind of par for the course?
Well, I think all of us know that in the last few years, the world economy has gone through more than it ever probably has in the past. You had wars, you had a pandemic, you had interest rate hikes, you had tariff hikes, energy shocks. But despite that, the economy, the global economy has grown. In I think 26, it was at 3%, projected at 3.4% for this year. Um, So clearly, the economy, world economy is growing. Growth has probably slowed down, but it seems to have grown shock absorbers. And all of us, economies, corporations, have learned to deal with a lot more stress. And the biggest source of that stress, Shatrajit, as we all know, is geopolitics. And there too, the global order is changing. Um, there are no more perma friends or perma enemies. There are only perma issues. It's an a la carte way of working. So you choose your partner depending on the issue at hand. You could have a partner on one issue who could be on the other side of the table on another issue. Uh, but I think that the way for a business to grow and thrive is to be resilient and also keep growing, be on a track of growth. We have actually played a contrarian view here. We've taken a contrarian view and we've used this period to grow pretty much across the board, across businesses, across our new growth platforms, um, across our more traditional businesses as well. It's been a two-part strategy, so to speak. For our overseas businesses, we've taken the view, and this has been for a few years now, that we are a multinational, but we also want to be multi-local. So as opposed to having operations in one or two places, as in manufacturing in one or two places and distributing to the rest of the world, we are now in a situation where we are multi-local, which means that we set up plants for our manufacturing businesses close to our consumers, uh, wherever they are in the world, so that you have supply chain flexibility. You're not impacted by, let's say, tariff wars, for example, or geopolitical um, uh, vagaries. On the Indian front, our businesses have grown tremendously. And I think the India businesses, whilst they have great teams and have been run with, great um, precision, so to speak, I think their performance is really a reflection of what's happening with the Indian economy and the India growth story. I think you need a strong economy to produce strong businesses. So, very often people talk about China plus one for India. And whilst that's a convenient shorthand, so to speak, I think it's intellectually very lazy. I think what we should be talking about now is the world plus one for India. I think we have all it takes. We've got a track record. And I think that we really can be a growth engine for the entire world in so many different ways.
Kumar, one of the criticisms of Indian business groups now is that while there is widespread consensus about the bright long term economic prospects of India, domestic capex has been weak. You have invested a lot, your group has invested a lot, and I want to come to that in a moment. But what do you think are the factors that are holding people back from doing more in domestic capex?
So I think that the rhetoric here probably lags the actual facts on the ground. The big industrial houses have all been, investing very hectically. I just read the other day that the latest RBI report says that advances to corporates from banks has gone up by 20% compared to last year in the last couple of months. And that is pretty evenly spread between small and medium enterprises as well. So I think that, this is something that's starting to change. I think that there is an issue about an aspect about it, which I would call capital discipline, where obviously you would take a view on an investment basis, so many factors, returns, volatility, industry, what's happening in the industry in the world. But I don't think we should confuse capital discipline with conviction about India. I find that conviction about India is perhaps the highest I've seen it for a long time.
I think, I mean, one of the factors I looked at was when you look at where we've seen a tremendous time for IPOs in the last 2 or 3 years, but when you look at where the money is getting utilized, the monies that are raised from IPOs, a lot of it is going into secondaries or giving returns to existing investors, and not a lot of it is going into the actual economy. And that's a pretty diversified trend. But as you're saying, I think I fully agree that the sentiment is intact, but hopefully we'll see a little bit more action in terms of investments. I want to come to your group now. You have significantly invested in new businesses as well as in capacity expansion. Could you give us a quick overview of what your group has been up to over the last few years, and what lies ahead for you?
So, like I said, Shrutajit, we took a contrarian view in the last 3 years and actually grew our businesses pretty aggressively. As of now, we have a $30 billion plan that's playing out. So this is not headline farming, as one could call it. This is actually, money going into the ground or groundbreaking and new teams coming together depending on the business that we're talking about. To give you a rough sense, since you and some people from the audience at least would know different companies, it's about $10 billion for Hindalco, 6 for um, uh, telecom for increasing our network of 4G and 5G, 2 billion for we've just made an acquisition in the renewable space that takes us up the pecking order in that industry by several notches. A billion for green fiber, which is fiber, but now made green in terms of the energy that's being used. Another billion for carbon black. Carbon black is a specialty chemical that's used majorly in tires and anything that's black. So, say for example, ink as well. Uh, interestingly, for carbon black, for example, we are investing in increasing capacity in Hungary, in India, and Thailand. Again, going back to being close to the consumer and multi local as opposed to just being multinational. So that's quite a sweep of industries, and I think that that again is reflective of the faith that we have in the Indian economy and its future.
Kumar, I don't think anyone has ever accused you of trying to headline farm. If anything, our complaint usually is that you don't come out and say enough. But anyway, I'm very, very glad you're here today. Um, Look, the ease of doing business and a steady and predictable regulatory regime is very critical to, um, um, you know, very critical to economic growth. You operate businesses in a number of different regulatory environments, number of different countries. How does India compare in those terms?
So that's an interesting question, and I'm glad you asked it because Uh, every country, every economy has its own issues, has its own pain points, its choking points. Uh, we are putting up a large plant in an advanced economy where we were allotted land by the local authorities. We spent 6 months of intense work. Just before we were to break ground, we had to change our site because of uh, largely because of environmental reasons. So I think that we aren't the only people who have issues like this, issues like land, environment, judicial, local laws, uh, almost across the board, and we have a presence across practically across the globe. You will have issues that come up, that a lot of the times are of similar nature. Sometimes they're peculiar to the country that we're talking about. So I don't think we should be feeling particularly sort of dejected about ease of doing business. I think that, like I said, every country has its own pain points. But having said that, I think in the last decade, a lot has been done by the government. Financialization, talk about um, tax reforms. Um, so much has happened that is digitization. And I think that the ease of doing business in the last decade has gone up tremendously compared to where we were before that.
We're seeing the use of tariffs as a key instrument of control by certain rich countries. Do you think this will lead domestic businesses to invest in overseas manufacturing capacity rather than making it here and exporting? And is that indeed the intent behind these moves?
I think that you're right. Probably that is the intent. But I don't think it works like that. I think companies would have a far more nuanced approach to investing. You can't, for example, invest in an aluminum facility in the US just because there are tariffs on aluminum exported from India, for example, theoretically. I mean, the cost structure is different, the capital required will be different, the kind of people that you require to work in that kind of environment may be there, may not be there. I don't think that's something that can practically happen. I'm saying this again because it's relevant. I think the route that we have taken, and this kind of predates what's happened in the last few years, of being local for our local customers. And I'll give you two examples. Novelis, which is the largest producer of aluminum rolled products, we are putting up for the North American market a $5 billion greenfield facility in Alabama in a place called Bay Minette. That is to serve for aluminum rolled product supply for cans as also for auto. Auto requires more of lightweighting, and that is being put up only to specifically serve our North American clients. It won't go and sort of move into Europe or into South America. So that's a large investment in a new economy for us relatively. We haven't made a greenfield investment of $5 billion at one location any time in the past. It's normally been more phased out. Another example is carbon black. Like I said a little while ago, we are investing. We have 16 plants in 12 countries. We've chosen to invest in three. Um, again, logic being close to customers as opposed to manufacturing in one or two locations and distributing around the world. So that's what our response has been.
Novelis is a tremendous story. For those of you who might not be familiar, the U.S. auto industry's dependence on Novelis is so large that when they had a fire in one of their plants, I'm reliably told that the production of Ford and many other major marquees suffered a great bit. But I think you managed to, keep the supply going, and the company recovered from it pretty quickly. You pulled the plans for Novelis to go public 2 years ago. Is it time now to revive those plans?
So, we pulled back the plans at that time because we weren't getting the kind of value discovery that we thought or hoped we would, or we were told we would. And that was the only reason why we might have
Never
wanted to.
believe bankers.
Yeah, well, I didn't say that. But, there was no other reason to want to list. As of now, we are focused on commissioning this large plant I was talking about. $5 billion is a large sum of money, and I think that a lot of the future of the company depends on how fast we can commission and ramp it up and fill up capacity. We have no compulsion to do an IPO. I mean, there's no need for us to raise funds. So I don't see that happening now at all.
You know, with your strong exposure to commodities, you're in a real financial sweet spot right now. We saw Hindalco's record profits in one quarter, 7,000 crore of net profit, quite tremendous. Congratulations. So while the business globally is doing amazingly well, your domestically, especially in aluminum and cement, you are seeing more competition. Especially in cement, you're seeing a strong player emerging by consolidating a lot of assets. What's your game plan? How do you plan to address the rising competition at home?
So, we are pretty used to competition. And I'll tell you why. My father went out and made large investments in Southeast Asia. This is large investments on the ground, not trading investments in Southeast Asia way back in the 70s. And at that time, Southeast Asia had every large player across the globe invested and playing in the market there. That gave us exposure to multi-global, multinational competition, and that has pretty much stayed in the DNA of our company. So competition is not a problem. I mean, the part of running a business, an important part is to compete and compete well. And risk taking is an important part for business leaders. You might as well not be in business otherwise. So I think our approach has been rather simple. We believe in running our own race. It's always good to have a view on competition only from the rear view mirror. But I think that we have focused on what we know best, which is running plants, which is investing deeply into ecosystems. If you look at the ecosystems in terms of suppliers, dealers, distributors, they're deeply penetrated in these businesses across the country. We have very deep customer relationships. We've increased capacity exponentially. I think that when you've been in industries for a long time, there is an accumulated knowledge that you have the advantage of. You have institutional memory, as I would call it. So I think that we're pretty much focused on running our own race. There is no business that's a territory of any one player. Anyone can make a foray into any business today. And I think that you have to focus on your strengths. And like I said, very deep relationships across the ecosystem, across the length and breadth of the company. Um, my father had said very famously back in 93, don't be scared of competition. He meant the foreign competition then, which was just coming into the country. Don't be afraid of competition. Let the competition be afraid of you. We are not wanting the competition to be afraid of us, but we are certainly not afraid of them.
Wonderfully put. Kumar, coming to domestic capital markets, we are seeing some amount of exit by global investors, and you're seeing a tremendous amount of entry by domestic retail investors. What do you think this means in the long run for India's economy and its businesses?
I think that's a very positive structural change that's happened. It means that domestic investors know and understand India much more and much better, much more deeply than foreign investors. Is my broad assumption. I think that's the correct assumption to make. I think that if you don't need to depend on foreign flows and their ebbs and ebbing out and flowing back in, that's a very advantageous position to be in. You have, which means a deeper and deeper financial market, and you're sort of self-dependent on institutional investors, retail investors within the country. For foreign investors, there are so many other issues at play: valuations, currency, geopolitics, geopolitical issues. Um, I don't think they can be away for too long, and I think that in the medium term, they probably will come back into India. There's too much that's happened on the global front just now. But I think this new development or this um, sort of new positive element of growth in the economy, which makes us self-sufficient by having very deep or much deeper financial markets than we did in the past, is a very big positive.
Talk us through your journey in telecom, which is a sector where you have perhaps faced your greatest challenge. There have been a lot of ups and downs there, restructuring, government coming in, etc. Could you talk us through, what the journey has been like, and where do you think that business is going to go now?
So that's a lot of water under the bridge, Shutrajit. I don't think it makes any point to go there because it's all in the past. I think at the moment we have been given relief by the government, which is more sectoral relief because it is important to have telecom to, for example, fulfill the ambition of Digital India, which is one of the government's most important missions and programs. I think we're in a phase of build out now. We're building out 4G and 5G capacity. We've seen more than a few years of not having the funds to be able to build out and really employ capex. And I think the next step is to raise funding with banks, which seems to be going very well. We can't be a number one and number two player there. I mean, I think we're a little late now for that. But I think we can be a very credible and profitable number three in the telecom business.
In a group like yours, being able to attract and hold on to top tier talent is key. What's your approach to talent?
So talent for us is very important. I mean, I've been the only one in the family who's been running the group for the last 30 years. My children have come in only in the last 2 years, 3 years. So we are pretty much a people's run organization, as we call it. Talent for us is very important, but I think that we genuinely believe in um, seeing talent grow, whether it's through job rotations. We, for our top talent, which is top performing and top potential, we would normally like them to operate at least across 3 countries in the course of their career, sometimes across functions. So we are deeply invested in growing talent, in helping them to grow not just professionally but also personally. And I think that a great deal of time has been invested by me over the years, and I'm very happy because we seem to be reaping the benefit of that. We're very lucky to have a very talented, committed workforce that brings great enthusiasm to the work that they do day in and day out.
Among the business leaders and CEOs, who are your, so to speak, role models from around the world? Are there, contemporary domestic leaders or global leaders you turn to for advice, who you consult on tough problems, etc.?
So, to a large extent, we depend on each team's own knowledge, experience, intelligence about what's happening globally. And each of our teams in every business, I think, is very up to speed with what they need to know about what's happening globally, like I said, and the different factors that can impact us. Beyond that, without taking names, I mean, one one has friends who are, who head multinationals that are much larger than us globally, private equity funds, uh, heads of consultancies globally. So one has friends who one reaches out to for advice. But at the end of the day, I think that you've got to process all of that, and decisions have to be your own. You either benefit and take credit for that, or you bear the cross for sometimes making the wrong call.
Let's talk a little bit about consumer sector. You're a big player in fashion. You're now in luxury in a significant way. Gallery Lafayette. Um, you've entered jewelry. This is also a segment where consumer behavior is changing very rapidly with the rise of D2C online shopping. How do you see the landscape, and how do your group plan to tackle it?
So new sectors for us. But I think that the teams that have come together, and practically all of these are D2C, the new business that we have in the construction and building area space, jewelry retail. These are all sort of, especially the latter, is a consumer play in India. And as the consumers become more mature, more affluent, the tastes are changing, the spending patterns are changing, and we're kind of, wanting to uh, fill that gap and cash in on those opportunities. I see a very, very strong response, much stronger and positive, more positive than I had thought. I think the trust behind the brand plays a very important role in our case. Um, and I see growth happening far beyond what we had expected. So it's been a very good experience so far.
You're also entering sports and entertainment in a significant way. You've bought RCB with a little help from friends like Satyan, who is here. Birla Studios is making a very big movie soon. What are your plans in the sector?
So it's new, both are new, especially sports is completely new, where we partnered with so many sort of, outstanding marquee partners. We're still very new to the game. We're half a season old, so we are still learning and trying to get our arms around what it takes to take in a business like that. I think we've been in software, entertainment software for a while, but again, the big screen is something that's new. It's again a consumer play. And it's basically a play on entertainment. Um, we have to just see how it goes. We've got to learn and take one step at a time.
Your two elder children are now emerging out of your shadows. They're quite well known. Ananya Birla is a big social media star, and she, manages her presence very well to market her own line of products and so on. Ariman is now getting into businesses. How do you look at their journeys? Do they turn to you for advice? When do we get to see them take a bigger and bigger role in your mainstay businesses?
So both have had very interesting journeys. My daughter Ananya, she started her own microfinance business when she was 19, so that's about 12 years ago. Is now the second largest microfinance company in the country. They're going in for a 3,000 crore IPO in a few months' time.
Are
My
you allowed to
son,
talk about that?
I don't know much about it, so I'd rather not. I'd better not talk about it. I'll be in trouble otherwise. Uh, what I've read about it, I mean, my daughter doesn't want to discuss it because she believes that it's something that she should own up to in terms of responsibility. Um, my son worked with me very intensely for 4 years. He then went on to do an MBA at Harvard, and he came back last year. So both of them are now engaged with the group quite heavily. My son looks after two businesses. He looks after the renewables business and fashion retail. He also looks at new business opportunities. Ananya has been very now deeply involved in real estate and in our global trading businesses. I think that they both have experience in business from different perspectives. They don't both have an identity of their own. My son also runs independently. When I say independently, it's not a group investment because it isn't a charter for the group, which is FNB, which is an interesting consumer play. I think they're taking more and more independent calls in their respective decisions in their respective businesses. We are pretty well aligned. We know what we want to achieve in these businesses. So there is constant conversation. We're in the same office on the same floor. We live in the same house. So that's how it should be. But more and more, I think they'll have to take independent calls for the businesses that they are starting to run.
When they turn to you for advice and when you give advice, do you think they mostly take it or not really?
I think that they churn it around. They take it as an important input. Most often, they would sort of, go with it. Sometimes they might just have a different view, and we discussed that as well. And I think that it's a very sort of mature adult conversation, as it should be.
But do you ever feel like one of them listen to you more than the other?
No, I don't think so. I think it depends on the issue rather than whether it's him or her. Sometimes they have strong opinions that aren't sort of, similar as mine. And it's good to have a debate. And actually, at the end of the day, it's their call because they are now getting more and more involved in those businesses.
Wonderful, Mr. Birla. You run a very large and complex business, a lot of planning, a lot of capital allocation. Thank you so much for joining us here today and sharing with us a little bit about your life and business. Ladies and gentlemen, a big round of applause for Mr. Kumar Birla.
Thank you. Wonderful to be here. Thank you.
A few Indian business stories have traveled as far or have been built on that scale as Mr. Birla has. Thank you for joining us, sir. And thank you, SK, for leading that conversation for us.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, it's that time of the evening, an important security announcement, so please pay careful attention. As part of the security protocol for the arrival of the Honorable Prime Minister, Shri Narendra Modi, a silent period will now begin. From this point onwards, we request everyone to please remain seated. Do not get up from your seats. The main doors will be closed and movement will not be permitted. Please keep your phones on silent mode. Also refrain from any photography or videography. These restrictions will remain in place through the special address and the Prime Minister's session. Even after the Prime Minister exits the stage, please remain seated until final security clearance is received. Once again, thank you for your cooperation, and the silent period begins now.